My name is Elena Mercer. I am 34 years old, and 3 nights ago, my parents threw my 8-year-old daughter into a thunderstorm because they said she needed to learn respect. The worst part was not the storm itself. It was the way my mother calmly closed the front door while my little girl screamed for me from the porch. People think military training teaches you how to survive war. What it really teaches you is how to stay perfectly still when your heart is breaking apart inside your chest. I learned that lesson in Afghanistan 12 years ago. I learned it again at my parents' lake house last Friday night. Rain hammered against the windows hard enough to shake the glass. Thunder rolled across the water like artillery fire. The power had flickered twice already, and the entire house smelled like wet wood and old smoke from the stone fireplace. My daughter Lily stood beside me in soaked pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit so tightly its ears bent sideways. I said apologize, my father told her. His voice was low. Controlled. Dangerous in the quiet way storms are dangerous before they touch land. Lily's chin trembled. I didn't do anything wrong. She called your mother a liar, my mother said from the kitchen table without looking up from her wineglass. Lily looked at me immediately. Panicked. Confused. She lied, Lily whispered. Grandma said Daddy left because he didn't love us anymore. The room went silent after that. Not loud silence. The kind that tightens around your throat. My ex-husband had died 2 years earlier during a construction collapse outside Denver. Lily knew that. She remembered the funeral. She remembered the folded flag. She still slept with one of his old hoodies beside her bed. My mother knew exactly what she was doing when she told her otherwise. I looked at her slowly. Why would you say that to her? My mother shrugged one shoulder. Children need hard truths. That wasn't the truth. She talks back exactly like you used to. There it was. Not the issue. Not the lie. Me. Everything with my parents always came back to me eventually. I was 6 years old the first time my father called me difficult. I remember because I was sitting under the kitchen table coloring on scrap paper while my mother made meatloaf for dinner. My brother Nathan had spilled milk across the floor 5 minutes earlier, but somehow I was the problem because I asked why boys never had to help clean up afterward. You always make things harder than they need to be, my father told me that night. I heard versions of that sentence for the next 20 years. At 10, I was difficult because I wanted to play soccer instead of piano. At 14, I was difficult because I cut my hair short after my mother said long hair was the only pretty thing about me. At 17, I was difficult because I enlisted in the Army 3 weeks after graduation. Nathan never got called difficult. Nathan crashed 2 cars before he turned 21. Nathan dropped out of community college twice. Nathan borrowed money from my parents so many times my mother stopped writing down the amounts. Still, every family photo sat framed around his achievements while my military awards stayed packed in boxes in my garage for years. 4 Bronze Stars. 2 Commendation Medals. 8 deployments. My mother once called them your little participation trophies. Lily shifted closer beside me as thunder cracked overhead again. My father stood from his chair slowly. Apologize to your grandmother. No, Lily whispered. He pointed toward the front door. At first, I honestly thought he was bluffing. Then he opened it. Cold rain exploded inside instantly. Wind tore through the hallway hard enough to rattle the hanging light fixture above the stairs. Dad, I said quietly. She needs discipline. She's 8. She's disrespectful. Lily grabbed my hand tighter. Her fingers were freezing already. I won't say it again, my father told her. My daughter looked up at me with wide terrified eyes that looked exactly like her father's eyes the night doctors wheeled him into surgery after the collapse. Something inside my chest went cold. Not anger. Colder than anger. Recognition. I had seen this before. Men with power. Small frightened people cornered in front of them. Everyone else in the room pretending this was normal. My mother finally looked up from her wineglass. If you had raised her properly, we wouldn't have to do this. That sentence did it. Not the storm. Not the shouting. That sentence. Because suddenly I was 22 again, standing in uniform at my own engagement dinner while my mother told my fiancé that no man wanted a woman trained to kill people. I was 27 again, holding newborn Lily while my father asked if I planned to dump the baby somewhere during deployments. I was 32 again at my husband's funeral while my mother complained the ceremony was too dramatic. Some people do not love you. They only love their control over you. The realization changes everything once it fully settles into your bones. My father stepped toward Lily. She can stand outside for 5 minutes and think about her behavior. No, I said. The word came out calm. Very calm. Military calm. The kind that usually comes right before somebody loses consciousness. My father frowned slightly. Excuse me? You are not putting my daughter outside. She's in my house. And she's my child. Lightning flashed across the lake bright enough to turn the windows white for half a second. Lily jumped against my side. My mother sighed dramatically. You always make scenes. I looked directly at her. You told my daughter her dead father abandoned her. She needs thicker skin. No, I said softly. You need consequences. That finally got their attention. My father laughed once. Short. Dismissive. Elena, don't start acting tough because you wore a uniform. I almost smiled. That was the thing about people like my father. They always confused restraint with weakness. They thought because you stayed quiet, you would stay quiet forever. They never understood that trained people do not panic. Trained people observe. They document. They wait. Then they act. And while my parents spent years believing I was still the frightened girl sitting under their kitchen table, they never noticed what I had quietly become after Iraq, after Afghanistan, after losing my husband, after rebuilding my life alone with a grieving child. They never noticed I had stopped needing their approval a very long time ago. I took Lily's hand gently and guided her behind me. My father noticed immediately. Not because the movement was aggressive. Because it was deliberate. People who spent their lives controlling rooms always noticed when control shifted away from them. You're overreacting, my mother said. Honestly, Elena, nobody was hurting her. Outside, thunder cracked again so violently the porch light flickered out for a second. Lily buried her face against my arm. My father still held the front door open. Rainwater blew across the hardwood floor in sharp cold streaks. 5 minutes outside never killed anybody, he said. I looked at him carefully. At 68 years old, my father still carried himself like the strongest man in every room. Broad shoulders. Thick gray hair combed straight back. Expensive watch. Perfect posture. But age had started revealing small truths. His left knee stiffened when storms rolled in. His breathing shortened slightly after climbing stairs. And lately, when people challenged him unexpectedly, his right eye twitched once before he spoke. It twitched now. You're scaring her, I said quietly. She should be scared. That sentence settled something permanently inside me. Because fear had always been the foundation of my parents' version of love. Fear kept children obedient. Fear kept wives silent. Fear kept family secrets buried. I knew that system well. I had survived inside it for 18 years. Then the military taught me something dangerous. Fear stops working once someone realizes they can survive without you. My mother stood and walked toward us slowly, wineglass still in hand. You always turn everything into drama. Your father is trying to teach respect. No, I said. He's trying to humiliate an 8-year-old child. She called me a liar. Because you lied. My mother's face hardened instantly. There were 14 framed family photographs in their living room. Nathan appeared smiling in every single one. I appeared in 4. In 2 of those 4, I stood at the very edge like somebody added afterward as an afterthought. Lily once asked me why Grandma didn't have more pictures of us in her house. I told her some people struggle to show love properly. The truth was simpler. My mother loved people who reflected well on her. Nathan needed her constantly. That made her feel important. I built a life without her. That made her resentful. She stepped closer until I could smell the Chardonnay on her breath. You think you're better than us now because you traveled the world with a gun? No. Then stop acting superior. I'm acting like a mother. For the first time that night, uncertainty crossed her face. Very small. Very quick. But there. Because underneath all her manipulation and criticism, my mother knew one thing absolutely. I would endure almost anything directed at me. But not at my daughter. Lily's fingers tightened around my wrist again. Mom, she whispered. I looked down immediately. I'm right here. Can we go home? The way she asked it almost destroyed me. Not dramatic. Not crying. Just tired. Children become quiet when disappointment starts feeling familiar. That realization hit harder than anything else in the room. I crouched carefully in front of her. Go get your backpack, baby. My father's voice sharpened instantly. Nobody's leaving. I stood slowly. In the Army, there's a moment before violence where trained people recognize each other. Not fear. Not aggression. Calculation. My father saw it in my face then. And for the first time all evening, he took one small step backward. You don't give orders to me anymore, I said calmly. This is my house. And that is my daughter. She needs discipline. She needs safety. She's perfectly safe. Lightning flashed again. Almost immediately afterward, the entire house went dark. The power finally failed. For 2 seconds, nobody moved. Rain hammered the roof overhead while wind howled across the lake outside. Then emergency backup lights flickered on near the hallway floor, casting the room in dim amber shadows. My mother hated darkness. Even when I was little, she slept with television noise running all night because silence made her anxious. Now she glanced toward the windows uneasily. My father shut the front door harder than necessary. Great. Fantastic. I ignored him and pulled my phone from my pocket. No signal. The storm had knocked out the nearest tower again. Roads probably flooding already, my father muttered. The lake house sat nearly 40 minutes from the nearest town. Dense forest surrounded the property on 3 sides. During bad weather, the roads became dangerous fast. Normally that isolation felt peaceful. That night it felt like a trap. Lily returned from the guest room hugging her backpack against her chest. My mother noticed immediately. You packed already? Lily nodded once. Something in my mother's expression shifted again. Because children do not pre-pack bags unless leaving quickly has happened before emotionally. Even if not physically. My mother looked at me. You told her we might leave? No, I said truthfully. She figured it out herself. Silence stretched. Then my father scoffed. Unbelievable. You're turning her against family exactly like you always did. I almost laughed at that. People like my father rewrote history constantly. When I stopped speaking after being mocked at dinner tables, I was cold. When I avoided arguments, I was dramatic. When I left home at 18, I was ungrateful. The story always changed to protect the people causing damage. That was another thing military training teaches you. Reality matters more than narrative. Facts matter more than hierarchy. And patterns matter more than apologies. I looked around the darkened room slowly. The same stone fireplace. The same mounted fishing photos. The same antique clock ticking near the staircase. When I was 12, Nathan broke that clock during an argument with my father. My mother blamed me because I should have stopped it. At 16, Nathan got arrested after driving drunk into somebody's mailbox. My father called it boys making mistakes. At 24, Nathan stole $12,000 from my parents' joint account. My mother cried for weeks. Then she paid his credit card debt anyway. Nobody ever threw Nathan into storms to teach him respect. Only me. Only now my daughter. Generational cruelty survives because somebody decides enduring it is easier than ending it. I was suddenly very tired of enduring. My phone buzzed once unexpectedly. Weak signal. One message. I glanced down. It was from Daniel Reyes. Retired Marine. Private security consultant. And the man who had quietly helped me investigate my parents for the last 6 months. The message contained only 4 words. Got the documents. Call me. My stomach tightened the second I read the message. Not fear. Confirmation. 4 months, pieces of things had not made sense. Small comments. Financial questions. My father suddenly asking detailed information about Lily's trust fund after my husband's death settlement came through. Nathan showing up at family gatherings acting unusually friendly toward me for the first time in 15 years. My mother repeatedly insisting I should move closer to let family help. At first I ignored it because grief makes everything feel suspicious. After losing my husband, I trusted almost nobody for nearly a year. Then 3 months ago, my father asked whether Lily's survivor benefits continued if I remarried. Not casually. Precisely. Like somebody gathering information for a plan. That was when my instincts woke up. Military instincts are difficult to explain to civilians. People think training gives you aggression. Mostly it gives you pattern recognition. You notice inconsistencies. You notice timing. You notice when people ask questions that are not really questions. Daniel noticed too. We met 8 years earlier overseas during a joint security operation outside Kandahar. Quiet man. Observant. The kind of person who remembered license plate numbers after seeing them once. After retirement, he built a private investigation business in Colorado. 3 weeks earlier, I hired him quietly. Not because I had proof. Because something felt wrong. Now, standing in my parents' dark lake house while thunder shook the windows, I suddenly knew I had been right. My father noticed my expression immediately. What? I locked my phone screen calmly. Nothing. Who texted you? Why? You're acting strange. I almost smiled at that. Predators always became nervous once prey stopped behaving predictably. Lily leaned against my side silently while the storm continued raging outside. Water streaked down the windows in violent sheets now. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a tree cracked loudly before crashing to the ground. My mother jumped slightly at the sound. We should light candles, she muttered. There are lanterns in the mudroom, I said automatically. She blinked at me. Because I remembered. Because despite everything, I had spent years learning this house inside and out as a child. Where the emergency batteries were stored. Which floorboards creaked. Which windows leaked during storms. People forget something important about neglected children. They become observers. When nobody listens to you, you learn to study everything instead. My father folded his arms. Roads are unsafe now anyway. You can leave in the morning after everyone calms down. No, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. You are not driving my granddaughter through this weather. I met his eyes directly. Watch me. The room changed after that. Tiny shift. But permanent. Because controlling people survive on assumption. They assume they can still intimidate you. Still guilt you. Still define reality. The moment those assumptions break, panic starts leaking through the cracks. My mother set her wineglass down harder than necessary. You're being irrational. No. I'm being late. What's that supposed to mean? It slipped out before I could stop it. But once spoken, it stayed hanging there between us. Late. Late noticing. Late protecting. Late understanding what they really were. Lily looked up at me quietly. Mom? I softened my voice immediately. It's okay, baby. But it wasn't okay. Because suddenly memories kept connecting themselves whether I wanted them to or not. When Lily was 5, she spilled juice accidentally during Christmas dinner. My father grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave fingerprints. I told myself he did not realize his own strength. When Lily cried after my mother mocked the sweater she made at school, my mother said she was too sensitive. I told myself older generations communicated differently. When Nathan joked that little girls without fathers grew up looking for attention, my parents laughed. I told myself family was complicated. But deep down, part of me always knew the truth. People who enjoy humiliating children do not improve with age. They just get subtler. Thunder rolled again overhead. My father walked toward the fireplace slowly. You always had a talent for poisoning every room you entered. There it was. Not concern. Not apology. Blame. Always blame. I remembered standing in this same living room at 19 during my first leave from basic training. My mother complained I walked too stiff now. My father said the army had filled my head with arrogance. 2 weeks later, Nathan punched a hole through the guest bedroom wall during an argument about money. Nobody called him arrogant. Nobody called him difficult. My father lit a lantern with slow, irritated movements. Warm yellow light spread across the room in soft shaking patterns. Then he said something that finally explained everything. You know, he muttered, if your husband had handled finances better, none of this would even matter. Every instinct inside me went still. Not emotional stillness. Operational stillness. The kind right before action. What does that mean? I asked. My father realized his mistake half a second too late. My mother looked at him sharply. Too sharply. Then both of them avoided my eyes. And suddenly every piece clicked together. The questions about survivor benefits. The sudden interest in my finances. Nathan acting friendly. Their pressure for me to move closer. The inheritance paperwork after my husband died. My voice became very calm. What did you do? Nobody answered. That was answer enough. Rain pounded the roof so hard it sounded like fists. Nobody moved. My father adjusted the lantern wick unnecessarily while my mother stared toward the kitchen like she suddenly found the wallpaper fascinating. People tell the truth in strange ways. Not through confession. Through silence. Lily looked between all of us quietly, sensing danger without understanding it fully. Children always know when adults become unsafe. What did you do? I repeated. My father finally sighed. You're overreacting again. Answer the question. It's complicated. No, I said softly. Complicated means you're trying to make something ugly sound reasonable. My mother crossed her arms tightly. After everything we've done for you. I laughed once before I could stop myself. Not happy laughter. Disbelief. That seemed to anger her more than shouting would have. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's familiar. Lightning flashed outside again, illuminating the room bright white for half a second. My father looked older suddenly. Not weaker. Just tired. Like maintaining control had started costing him more energy than before. He sat heavily in his leather chair near the fireplace. When Daniel died, he began slowly, you weren't thinking clearly. My stomach turned cold. There it was. Not sympathy. Opportunity. I stayed silent. People reveal more when nobody interrupts them. You had a child, he continued. Bills. A mortgage. Survivor benefits don't last forever. They last until Lily turns 18. His eye twitched again. Small. Fast. You looked overwhelmed. I was grieving. Exactly. My mother stepped closer beside him. We were trying to help. I looked at her. By telling my daughter her dead father abandoned her? That's not what this is about. No, I said quietly. It's exactly what this is about. Because cruelty always connected eventually. People who viewed others as property never stopped at one boundary. Children. Money. Grief. Control was control. Lily tugged gently at my sleeve. Mom, I don't like it here. I crouched beside her immediately. I know. Can we please go home now? Home. Such a simple word. But hearing it from her mouth while standing inside the house I grew up in nearly broke something open inside me. Because this place had never truly been home for me. A house, yes. A battlefield, sometimes. But never home. Home was Daniel cooking pancakes on Sunday mornings while music played too loudly in the kitchen. Home was Lily falling asleep against my shoulder during thunderstorms because she trusted I would keep her safe. Home was peace. Not this. Never this. I kissed the top of her head gently. We're leaving soon. My father stood abruptly. Enough. The lantern light threw sharp shadows across his face now. Hard lines. Hard eyes. You don't walk into my home, accuse us of nonsense, then storm out acting superior. I rose slowly. Watch me. You owe your mother an apology. No, I said. You owe my daughter one. That child disrespected us. She defended her father. He's dead. The room froze. My mother inhaled sharply. Even my father seemed surprised he said it aloud. Lily's face crumpled instantly. Not loud crying. Worse. Silent hurt. The kind children carry for years. And something inside me finally snapped clean in half. Not explosive anger. Precision. I stepped toward my father once. Only once. But every military instinct I spent years controlling moved quietly into place underneath my skin. Balance. Distance. Hands visible. Threat assessment. My father noticed immediately. He actually took another small step backward. I spoke very carefully. You will never speak about her father that way again. You threatening me? No. I paused. I'm promising you. Silence swallowed the room. The storm outside sounded distant suddenly compared to the one standing between us. My mother shook her head like she still believed this could somehow be manipulated back into normalcy. Elena, she said carefully, families say things during arguments. No, I replied. Abusive people say cruel things and call them arguments afterward. That hit her harder than shouting would have. Because labels frightened people like my mother. Not immoral. Not unfair. Abusive. Abusive meant patterns. Responsibility. Truth. I am not abusive, she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said the quietest thing I had ever said in that house. When I was 13, you locked me outside overnight because I embarrassed you in front of church friends. Her face drained completely. Lily looked up at me, confused. What? I kept my eyes on my mother. You remember, I said. My father shifted uncomfortably. That was different. It was 39 degrees outside. You came back in after an hour. No, I said. I came back in at sunrise. Neither of them spoke. Because they remembered too. I remembered every minute of that night. the porch swing creaking in cold wind. My hands numb inside my sleeves. Watching kitchen lights turn off one by one while realizing nobody inside cared if I was frightened. The next morning my mother made pancakes and acted like nothing happened. That was her favorite strategy. Damage someone. Then erase the evidence by pretending normality returned. My therapist once told me something important after Daniel died. Children raised in emotionally unstable homes often become exceptionally calm adults because they spent their entire childhood monitoring danger. Military training sharpened that instinct into steel. And now, watching my daughter stand frightened in the same house where I learned fear, I suddenly understood something with terrifying clarity. If I stayed connected to these people, eventually they would wound her the way they wounded me. Maybe not physically. Maybe not loudly. But slowly. Quietly. The way poison works. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Another message from Daniel Reyes. This one contained an address. And one sentence. You need to see this immediately. I stared at the message for 3 full seconds. Then I looked up slowly at my parents. My father noticed immediately. What now? I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Nothing you'll admit to. My mother's face tightened. You've become paranoid. No, I said quietly. I became observant. Lily moved closer beside me while thunder rolled across the lake again. The lantern light flickered softly against the walls, making old family photographs seem to shift in the shadows. I looked at those photographs one last time. Nathan smiling beside fishing trophies. Nathan beside my parents at graduations. Nathan holding birthday cakes. There was one picture of me in uniform near the hallway. One. And even that photo sat half hidden behind a ceramic vase. Funny what families reveal without realizing it. My father folded his arms. Who keeps texting you? A man smarter than you. That landed harder than I expected. Because my father's expression changed instantly. Not anger first. Fear. Tiny. Fast. But there. My military training taught me something civilians often miss. People only get defensive about information when they know exposure is possible. You hired somebody, he said carefully. I didn't answer. My mother looked between us suddenly uneasy. Elena. My father's voice sharpened. You investigated us? Still I said nothing. Silence is powerful when guilty people fill it themselves. And my father filled it quickly. You've lost your mind. No, I replied. I think I finally found it. The storm outside intensified again. Wind slammed tree branches against the side of the house with violent scratching sounds. Lily flinched. I placed my hand gently on the back of her head. My father noticed that too. He noticed everything now. Because the room had shifted completely beyond his control. You had no right, he snapped. There it is, I said softly. What? Not concern about what I found. Concern that I looked. My mother sank slowly into a chair near the kitchen island. Please stop doing this tonight. Doing what? This interrogation. I almost smiled. That word mattered. Interrogation. Not misunderstanding. Not argument. Because somewhere deep down, they already knew this conversation had crossed into truth. My father stepped closer toward me again, trying to regain authority through proximity like he always had when I was younger. Only now I was no longer 16. And he was no longer the largest force in the room. You think military training makes you intimidating? He asked quietly. No. Then stop posturing. I looked directly into his eyes. Do you know what military training actually taught me? He said nothing. It taught me that dangerous people rely on isolation. The room went still again. My mother whispered, Elena. It taught me abusive systems survive through silence. Through fear. Through convincing victims nobody will believe him. My father scoffed loudly. Victims? Jesus Christ. And it taught me, I continued calmly, that patterns always escalate. Lily looked up at me quietly while I spoke. Listening. Learning. That mattered more than anything. Because children remember what protection looks like. Even years later. Especially years later. My father pointed toward the hallway angrily. You're poisoning that little girl against her family. No, I said. I'm teaching her what unsafe people look like. His face darkened instantly. There it is, he muttered. What? You always needed somebody to blame. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I asked the question I should have asked years earlier. Why was I always the enemy to you? That caught him off guard. Not because the question was complicated. Because it was honest. My father opened his mouth once. Closed it again. And for the first time in my life, I watched him struggle to build a version of reality fast enough to protect himself. My mother spoke instead. You were difficult. There was that word again. Difficult. The family label they used every time I resisted humiliation. I nodded slowly. At 7, I said, I was difficult because I cried when Nathan broke my arm during a fight. My father looked away immediately. At 11, I was difficult because I told a teacher Mom slapped me in a grocery store parking lot. My mother's breathing changed slightly. At 15, I was difficult because I refused to lie to police after Nathan stole from his employer. Lily stared up at me wide-eyed now. Not frightened anymore. Listening. Children know truth when they hear it. My voice stayed calm. Always calm. That word never meant difficult, I said. It meant disobedient. Nobody answered. Because there are moments when truth enters a room so completely that denial becomes exhausting. Rain continued hammering the windows. The old clock near the staircase ticked loudly through the silence. Then my phone buzzed a third time. This time Daniel called directly. I answered immediately. Talk to me. His voice came low and controlled through static. You need to leave that house tonight. Every instinct inside me sharpened instantly. Why? A pause. Then. Your father and brother tried filing emergency guardianship paperwork for Lily 3 weeks ago. The room disappeared around me for half a second. Not emotionally. Operationally. Tunnel focus. Threat assessment. Extraction planning. I spoke carefully. Explain. They claimed you were psychologically unstable after military service. My mother gasped softly. Not shocked. Caught. Daniel continued. The filing didn't go through because the judge flagged missing documentation. But Elena. Another pause. They were preparing to challenge custody. For a moment, I heard nothing except rain. Not because the storm grew louder. Because my entire body shifted into the same cold focus I used during combat evacuations overseas. Every emotion moved aside. Fear later. Action now. I kept my voice even. Who helped them? Your brother made first contact with a family attorney in Denver, Daniel said. But most of the paperwork traces back to your father. I looked directly at him across the room. He already knew I knew. That was the strange thing about exposure. Sometimes the guilty recognize it before words are spoken. Daniel continued speaking through static. There's more. Say it. They've been documenting you for months. My mother covered her mouth instantly. Again, not surprised. Caught. What kind of documentation? I asked. Photos. Notes. Witness statements from church friends. Claims about anger issues. Instability. Reckless behavior. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. Abusive people always prepare narratives before escalation. That way when the victim finally reacts, they can point and say, "See? Look how unstable she is." Daniel's voice lowered further. "Elena, they were building a custody case." Lily wrapped both arms around my waist tightly. I looked down at her small frightened face and something inside me became absolutely merciless. Not violent. Worse. Certain. "You still there?" Daniel asked. "Yes." I copied everything I could before the attorney locked access. "I'm sending files now." "Thank you." "Elena." "What?" "You were right to trust your instincts." The line disconnected. Silence filled the room immediately afterward. Heavy silence. My father sat rigid beside the fireplace. My mother looked pale for the first time all night. Nobody denied it. That mattered. Because innocent people deny accusations instantly. Guilty people calculate first. Lily's voice came small against my side. "Mom?" I crouched beside her immediately. "I'm here." "Are they taking me away?" The question nearly shattered me. Because 8-year-old children should not know custody battles exist. They should know cartoons. Birthday parties. Bedtime stories. Not fear. Never fear. I touched her face gently. "Nobody is taking you anywhere." "Promise?" "Yes." And unlike the adults standing around us, I never made promises lightly. My father finally spoke. "You're twisting this into something ugly." I rose slowly. "No," I said. "You already made it ugly. We were worried about her future. You tried to take my child. You're unstable." The word hung in the room like smoke. Unstable. There it was. The oldest weapon people use against women who stop obeying. Not angry men. Not controlling men. Emotional women. Unstable women. Difficult women. I stared at my father quietly. Then I asked the question that mattered most. "When exactly did you decide my daughter belonged to you?" His jaw tightened instantly. My mother stepped forward suddenly desperate. "Nobody said that. You filed paperwork. We were protecting her." "From what?" Silence again. Because there was no answer they could say aloud without revealing themselves completely. From independence. From influence they could not control. From a mother who no longer feared them. My father pointed toward me sharply. "Ever since you came back from overseas, you've been different." I almost smiled at that. Different. Meaning harder to manipulate. Meaning less afraid. Meaning trained to recognize coercion. "You know what changed overseas?" I asked quietly. Nobody answered. I learned what power looks like when it stops pretending to care. Lightning flashed outside again. The room lit bright white for half a second. And suddenly I remembered another storm. Afghanistan. A village outside Kandahar after mortar fire tore through half the road near our convoy. One little girl sat alone beside a collapsed wall holding a broken doll while adults shouted around her. Chaos everywhere. But she stayed perfectly silent. I remember kneeling beside her while rain started falling across the dust. She looked at me with enormous terrified eyes and asked one question in broken English. "Safe now?" I carried that child nearly 2 miles to extraction transport. Years later, after therapy and funerals and retirement and motherhood, I finally understood why I never forgot her face. Because frightened children remember exactly who protected them. And exactly who didn't. I looked around the lake house slowly. At my mother. My father. The old family photographs. The polished wood floors. The storm outside. Then at my daughter standing beside me clutching her stuffed rabbit with trembling hands. And I realized something with perfect clarity. This would become one of the memories shaping the rest of her life. Not because of the storm. Because of what I did next. My father spoke again, softer now. Elena, sit down. Let's talk rationally. Rationally. Interesting word. Men often ask for calm discussion only after losing control. I picked up Lily's backpack from beside the couch. My mother's eyes widened immediately. You can't drive in this weather. Watch me. Elena, please. That word sounded strange coming from her. Please. Not command. Not criticism. Fear. Good. She should have been afraid. Not of violence. Of consequence. Because for the first time in their lives, they were about to lose permanent access to somebody they believed would always come back. My father moved toward the doorway before I reached it. Not aggressively. Strategically. One final attempt to control the outcome. Elena, he said carefully, if you walk out tonight, don't bother coming back. I stopped. Not because the threat worked. Because it didn't. That realization deserved a moment. All my life, those words would have terrified me. Don't come back. As a child, being unwanted by your parents feels like death. You spend years reshaping yourself into smaller and smaller versions, hoping eventually they will love you correctly. Quieter. Prettier. More obedient. Less difficult. But grief changes people. War changes people. Motherhood changes people most of all. I looked at my father standing in front of the same front door he once locked behind a 13-year-old girl during a winter storm. Then I said the truest thing I had ever said to him. I stopped coming back a long time ago. Something in his face cracked slightly after that. Not remorse. Loss of control. Different thing entirely. My mother stepped forward quickly. Don't do this. Do what? Tear the family apart. I stared at her. Then slowly looked around the room again. At the fear. The manipulation. The silence. The years of excuses wrapped around cruelty like ribbons around poison. You think I'm the one who did that? Her eyes filled instantly with angry tears. My mother cried beautifully. Always had. Soft voice. Shaking hands. Perfect wounded expression. When I was younger, those tears confused me. I thought people who cried must automatically be hurting. Then adulthood taught me something important. Some people cry because pain matters to them. Others cry because consequences do. You're being cruel, she whispered. I almost laughed again. Cruel. Interesting word from a woman who told her granddaughter a dead father abandoned her. Lily tugged lightly at my sleeve. Mom. I'm scared. That ended the conversation permanently. I crouched beside her and zipped her raincoat carefully all the way to her chin. Her little fingers shook while she held the stuffed rabbit against her chest. You remember our storm drill? I asked softly. She nodded once. Tell me. We stay together. That's right. What else? We keep moving. I smiled slightly. Good job. Military children learn strange things early. Not because I wanted her to. Because life demanded it. My father watched us quietly now. Studying. Calculating. Maybe realizing for the first time that Lily trusted me completely while nobody in that room trusted him at all. That difference mattered more than authority ever would. My mother tried one last time. She needs grandparents. No, I said calmly. She needs safety. You're overreacting. No, I replied. I underreacted for 30 years. Silence followed that. Heavy silence. The kind truth leaves behind. Then my father said something that finally revealed the entire game. If you leave now, we'll have no choice except legal action. There it was. Not love. Ownership. Control. Leverage. My daughter stiffened beside me immediately. I looked directly at him. You threaten custody after tonight? We have concerns. You created concerns. You're unstable. I stepped closer slowly. Very slowly. My voice stayed quiet. Do you know what unstable people don't do? His jaw tightened. They don't spend 6 months documenting evidence before acting. That landed hard. Because suddenly he understood something important. I was not reacting emotionally tonight. I had been preparing. Watching. Confirming patterns. Just like him. Only better. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. What evidence? I held his stare. The recordings, for starters. My mother went completely pale. Good. 3 months earlier, after one especially strange dinner conversation about Lily's finances, I started recording interactions during visits. Not secretly at first. Defensively. Like carrying insurance. But abusive people always escalate when they think nobody is stopping them. And now I had recordings of everything. The insults. The manipulation. Tonight's threats. The storm. My mother whispered, "You recorded us?" Yes. That's sick. No, I said. That's survival. My father suddenly looked furious in a way he hadn't all night. Not explosive. Cold. Dangerous. You think anybody's going to believe you over us? The question revealed everything. Not. Did we hurt you? Not. How did things get this bad? Only. Who will people believe? Image. Reputation. Public perception. That was always the real religion inside this family. I reached for the door handle. My father blocked it again. Only slightly. Only enough. But after military service, you learn something crucial. Small physical acts matter. Blocking exits. Cornering movement. Invading space. Control often announces itself quietly before violence ever begins. My entire posture shifted automatically. Not threatening. Ready. My father noticed instantly. So did my mother. Elena, she whispered nervously. I looked directly at him. Move. 2 seconds passed. Then 3. Rain slammed against the windows behind us while thunder shook the house again. And for the first time in my life, my father looked uncertain whether pushing further was safe. Not because I would hurt him. Because he suddenly realized he no longer understood the woman standing in front of him. Good. People like my father depended on predictability. Fear. Compliance. But war had burned those things out of me years ago. Finally, slowly, he stepped aside. Not graciously. Not kindly. But he moved. And that moment mattered more than he realized. Because abusive people rarely surrender power voluntarily. They surrender it when they understand it no longer works. I opened the front door. Cold rain exploded across the porch instantly. Wind tore through the trees surrounding the lake hard enough to make branches groan in the darkness. Lily pressed close against my side. I tightened my grip on her hand. Behind us, my mother's voice cracked for the first time all night. If you walk away now, you'll regret it. I stopped at the doorway one final time. Not because I doubted myself. Because some endings deserve witnesses. I turned slowly toward her. For years I had imagined what it would feel like to finally say everything buried inside me. I thought it would sound dramatic. Angry. Explosive. Instead, when the moment came, I just felt tired. Very tired. You know the saddest part? I said quietly. My mother stared at me without speaking. I spent most of my life believing if I worked hard enough, suffered quietly enough, achieved enough, eventually you would love me the way you loved Nathan. The storm held outside behind me. But the problem was never me. My father looked away first. That mattered too. I brought my daughter here hoping she would have grandparents, I continued. Instead she learned the same lesson I did. Lily squeezed my hand tighter. My voice stayed calm. Love that depends on obedience is not love. Nobody spoke. Because there was nothing left to defend. No explanation strong enough. No manipulation subtle enough. Just truth standing naked in the middle of the room. I looked at my father one last time. When you locked me outside at 13, I remember thinking someday I would become strong enough that nobody could ever make me feel that small again. His jaw tightened slightly. I did become strong enough, I said softly. You just never noticed. Then I walked out into the storm with my daughter beside me. The rain was freezing. Within seconds my jeans were soaked through and Lily's had whipped sideways in the wind. Thunder rolled across the lake so loudly it vibrated through the ground beneath our feet. But neither of us looked back. Not once. I got Lily into the truck quickly and wrapped a blanket around her while the engine started. She sat trembling quietly in the passenger seat. Not crying. Just exhausted. I brushed wet hair gently away from her face. You okay, baby? She nodded weakly. Then after a moment she whispered, Are Grandma and Grandpa bad people? Children ask impossible questions in the smallest voices. I looked through the windshield at the dark lake house standing against the storm. Lights glowing. Curtains moving slightly. Two figures still standing near the doorway watching us leave. Then I looked back at my daughter. I think, I said carefully, they are people who never learned how to love safely. Lily considered that seriously. Then she asked the question that finally broke my heart completely. Was it like this when you were little too? Rain hammered the truck roof overhead. I stared at my hands on the steering wheel for a second before answering. Yes. Her tiny face crumpled instantly. Not because she was scared anymore. Because children cannot understand why somebody would hurt their mother. She reached across the center console and hugged me hard. And there, parked in the middle of a storm outside the house where I spent 18 years feeling invisible, my 8-year-old daughter healed something nobody else ever could. You didn't deserve that, she whispered. Simple sentence. 8 words. That was all. Not therapy. Not revenge. Recognition. I closed my eyes briefly. Then I held her as thunder rolled over the lake one final time. 3 months later, the custody case collapsed completely. Daniel's evidence exposed the false documentation before formal filing ever reached a courtroom. The attorney representing my parents quietly withdrew from the case after reviewing the recordings from that night. Nathan stopped speaking to me entirely once he realized I would not stay silent anymore. My mother mailed 2 letters. I never answered either one. My father never apologized. Some people would rather lose family forever than admit they caused harm. That is their tragedy. Not mine. Lily started therapy that autumn. So did I. Healing turned out to be less dramatic than revenge. Mostly it looked like small peaceful moments slowly replacing fearful ones. Movie nights during thunderstorms. New locks on the house. Long conversations at the kitchen table without walking on emotional landmines. And one Saturday morning 6 months later, Lily asked if we could donate her old stuffed rabbit to a children's shelter because other scared kids might need him more now. I cried in the pantry afterward where she could not see me. Not because I was sad. Because kindness surviving pain is one of the bravest things a person can do. People think strength looks loud. It doesn't. Sometimes strength is just a woman opening a door during the worst storm of her life and refusing to leave her child behind inside it.